Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the tragedy of conservation. This article here is speaking about the role of the indigenous community when it comes to conservation of the forest areas. Before we understand what is this article all about, let us try and understand what is the difference between a national park as well as the wildlife sanctuary. We have one of the important laws in India that happens to be the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which provides for the establishment of protected areas in India. What are these protected areas? It can include a national park or it can include a wildlife sanctuary. What is the difference? Basically, both the national park and the wildlife sanctuary draw its power from the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. But there are differences between these two protected areas. When it comes to the national park, they provide protection to the entire ecosystem. It can be the flora, it can be the fauna, it can be the landscape. So what we have is that the entire area, the entire region, what is called as national park, will be protected when it comes to the national parks. But when it comes to the wildlife sanctuaries, as the very name denotes, it is protection of the wildlife. It can be animals, it can be reptiles, it can be insects, it can be birds. So all the wild animals that which is prevalent in that particular region will be protected under the wildlife sanctuary. Now let us focus on the major differences between the national park as well as the sanctuary. When it comes to the national park, they have a greater degree of protection. All the human activities will be completely restricted. That is in comparison to the wildlife sanctuary. So the protection with respect to the national park is comparatively more than compared to the wildlife sanctuary. We have to focus on the what is the activity that is permitted. When it comes to the activities, most of the activities is prohibited when it comes to the national park unless it is permitted by the chief warden in that particular area. But when it comes to the sanctuaries, everything will be permitted unless they are prohibited. Certain activities, let's say for example, which are regulated in sanctuaries such as grazing of livestock, are prohibited completely in the national park. Only certain areas can be visited and only those activities can be permitted in the national park which is given permission by the chief warden of that particular forest. So kindly remember, most of these activities are restricted in the national park, but then that is not the same when it comes to the wildlife sanctuary. Now when it comes to the particular species, there can be a wildlife sanctuary that which can be created only for a particular species. Let's say for example, grizzly giant squirrel. So a wildlife sanctuary can be created explicitly only for a particular species, but that is not the same when it comes to the national park. The national park is not primarily focused on a particular species, but a sanctuary can be focusing on a particular species. Now when it comes to the boundaries are fixed and they cannot be changed that easily when it comes to the national park, but when it comes to the sanctuaries, it is more flexible and can be changed by the government through an executive order as well. These are some of the major differences when it comes to the national park as well as wildlife sanctuary. Why are we discussing this? That is to understand what is this article all about. Basically, we have the central government of India back then which had come up with what is called as the Forest Rights Act. This Forest Rights Act gave more rights to the people who have been living in the forest. When you look into the Forest Rights Act, we have section 2 of C, which is speaking about forest dwelling scheduled tribes. We have section 2 of O, which speaks about other traditional forest dwellers. So who are the people living here? We have two sections of the people. One is what is called as scheduled tribes. The other is what is called as the other traditional forest dwellers. Let's understand who are these scheduled tribes. According to the definition given by the Act, it says the members or community of the scheduled tribes who primarily reside in, who depend on the forest or forest lands for bona fide livelihood needs, and includes the scheduled tribe pastoral community as well. Who are the other traditional forest dwellers? These are the people who are not the scheduled tribes but they have been living in that particular area for a long period of time, which can be about 3 generations. So there is a lineage that is attached to such people. They are not tribes, but they have been living in that particular area for a longer period of time. So what does the definition say? It says that the member of the traditional forest dweller community should have at least 3 generations prior to 13th day of February 2005 primarily resided in and who depend on the forest or forest land for bona fide livelihood needs. This is the definition given under the Forest Act. Now, what this article currently says is that there are number of people in the Western Ghats who are not tribes, but they are the other traditional forest dwellers. They take into picture the example of the state of Karnataka. Who are these people? You have the Gaulis, the Kunbis, the Halaki Wakala, Kare Wakala, Kunbi and Kuluvadi Marathi as well. These are the people who are not tribes, but they are the other traditional forest dwellers who have been living in the forest areas. What do? They collect all the minor forest produce, they collect cinnamon, they also collect cocoa, and they make their living in that particular forest area. So as a result, the Forest Rights Act, which the government of India came up with, is providing certain rights to the scheduled tribes as well as the other traditional forest dwellers. These rights were further enhanced when there was a declaration on the rights of the indigenous people in 2007 by the United Nations. So when this particular notification declaration was given by United Nations, it further enhanced all their rights when it comes to the forest areas. But here is the major concern. What exactly happens? In the year 2012, we have about 39 areas covering the national parks, wildlife sanctuary and reserve forests in the Western Ghats, which were declared as World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. So the minute this particular declaration of World Heritage Site was made by UNESCO, there were restrictions that were imposed on all these communities. So what are the restrictions? One is that these areas were becoming inaccessible. Second, they were not able to collect the minor produce. And third is that they were not able to carry out their usual activities, and as a result, they feel a lot of suffocation in this particular area. So the restrictions on the movement following this particular declaration in these territories, because they were ecologically sensitive areas, also meant that they had limited access to all these areas. So what are the concerns right now? The author in the specific scenario brings into picture the state of Karnataka to explain this particular issue. What are the major issues? We have the Forest Rights Act, which has given them all the rights. But what is happening with respect to these people? They have claims. They are supposed to carry out their livelihood means, but when they make a claim for the forest area in that particular region, the claims were denied by the forest authorities in the state of Karnataka. In fact, the number of claims that was accepted with respect to the tribal community is far more compared to the other traditional forest dwellers as well, and they were treated as inconsequential when it comes to this particular region. Here comes one of the important aspects of forest conservation. What is this forest conservation? Basically, we have two approaches to forest conservation. When you look at the Indian traditional setup, that is one approach. Then we also have the Western approach, or what is called as the NGO approach. What is this Indian approach or the traditional approach? When it comes to Indian approach, what we have is people who are living in a forest area. They treat animals with respect. They also treat the forest as a region where it has to be conserved for the future use. So when it comes to the Indian approach, it is more about cordial relationship between the forest areas as well as people. It is not about abusing the forest. It is not about extracting the forest alone, but it is about mutual understanding of forest and nature with the human beings. So what we have is indirectly all these people are entering into the mode of conservation when it comes to the Indian approach or the traditional approach. Then we have what is called as the Western approach or the NGO approach. What is this Western approach? Basically, they isolate forest animals as well as human beings as a separate entity. So they compartmentalize. Earlier, when it comes to the Indian approach, everything was uniform, everything was comprehensive, everything was organic. So you have nature which is taking care of the human beings as well as the animals. So it was an integrated approach. But when it comes to what we have as the modern, the Western or the NGO approach, animals are treated separately and you have human beings who are treated separately. So when it comes to the NGO approach, you have the tribal society, the Adivasi society who are completely segregated, and they are of the view that if there are these people in that particular locality, the conservation programs and schemes will be haunted, says the NGO approach. So the NGO approach looks at Adivasis and the animals and the biodiversity in compartments and views that integration cannot happen in the near future. So what is this article currently going on to say? That this whole idea of the NGO approach or the Western approach adapted in certain quarters in the state of Karnataka is not working good for the indigenous community. Why? Because the indigenous community from a very long time, or the tribal community from the very long time, have been living in this particular area, collecting all the livelihood mechanisms, and they have no other option or the employment scheme and program, because even if they come out, they are rehabilitated, they cannot live because they are not updated with respect to the modern era. But since they are living in the forest area, they have every option, every livelihood mechanism which they are also integrating with the nature. But since the Karnataka government or the authorities in this specific case has noted or taken the NGO approach, it means that the claims made under the Forest Rights Act was not taken into picture. As a result, it is the indigenous community who have been suffering, and as a result, assuming that denying the tribals or other traditional forest dwellers their rights in the forest would serve the purpose of conservation is a wrong idea, says the author in this particular case. As we just discussed, the NGO approach believes in what is called a segregation and compartmentalization. If these people are removed, they feel that conservation efforts, biodiversity will be taken care of, they would be safeguarded. That will not be right, but these indigenous community people will have to stay in the forest, and that is what is conservation, says the author. The second factor put forward by the author says that the combined stretch of land claimed by these indigenous community is comparatively smaller. They have made claims under the Forest Rights Act, which has been rejected by the authorities. Now let's look into another parallel as well. We have the forest areas which have been destroyed in the name of development and growth as well. We have built dams, we have built in hydroelectricity power projects, we have laid railway lines, and we have engaged the forest activities into mining. We have also engaged the power plants as well. So when you look into that particular issue, we have put into rest all the forest areas for the growth and development of the human activities in a personal agenda. But what is happening in the present scenario? These people are asking for the livelihood means and mechanisms as a source of income. That is not taken into picture by the authorities, but in a parallel situation, we have used all the powers for the other set of activity. This is not right, says the author. This is where the author says is bringing a conflict between the indigenous community as well as the conservationists. In fact, we have one of the reports, that is the Global Environmental Outlook, Report 5. It currently goes on to mention that people living in the nature surroundings are integral to the conservation as they relate it with an integrated and a spiritual way of life. As we discussed, the Indian traditional form of living is more comprehensive, but the NGO approach or the conservationist approach is looking at in silos, and as a result, conservation is not taking place, says the author in the present scenario. So what is the way forward? The way forward is that yes, the Western Ghats have been declared as the World Heritage Site. It is to be protected, but only when people are legally empowered as per the Forest Rights Act, where they become part of this forest process in conserving it and upscaling it and also bringing equity when it comes to the forest conservation is what we have to look at, says the author. So the author going forward suggests that the government will have to be more serious in giving all these rights that is given to them under the Forest Rights Act, and conservation will happen automatically as these people are part of that particular setup in the forest area, says the author in this case. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the broken bonds of democracy. The article here is speaking about the electoral bonds. What is this electoral bond has been explained in one of our videos. So the link for the same will be given in our description box. So kindly look into it. Our focus today would be in reference to the Central Information Commission and its order made in reference to the electoral bonds. What was this order all about? We have the Central Information Commission. It has recently gone on to say that there is no public interest involved in disclosing the names of the buyers of the electoral bonds, while reiterating the very argument that information cannot be shared under the right to information as it is held as a fiduciary capacity. What is the background to this particular issue? We have the State Bank of India, which issues the electoral bonds to the people who want to contribute to the political parties. The Right to Information activist had asked information about the donors. Who are the donors? Let's say, for example, I as a person would want to contribute, let's say, to BJP, or let's say to Congress, or let's say, for example, Shiv Sena or any other party. So if I am taking an electoral bond, I will become what is called as the donor. So the Right to Information activist was seeking the information of number of donors who have been contributing to this electoral bond scheme. So when this particular request was made and it happened to go to the Central Information Commission, they have rejected this particular request, saying that there is no public interest involved in disclosing the names of the buyers of the electoral bond. It brings into concept what is called as the concept of fiduciary relationship. Also remember, before we understand what is this fiduciary relationship, in the month of January, there was a completely conflicting opinion given by the Central Information Commission. Back in January 2020, the same Central Information Commission had also said that electoral bond process should be more transparent and the names of those buying them should also be declared. And now what we have is a conflicting opinion given by the Central Information Commission. Now let us understand what is the concept of the fiduciary relationship as quoted by the Central Information Commission. We have the Information Commissioner who went on to hold that the disclosure of the names of the donors and the donees may be in contravention of provisions contained in section 8 of 1 of E of J of the RTI Act itself, which exempt a public authority to give a citizen information available to a person in his fiduciary relationship. What is the concept of fiduciary relationship? Basically, fiduciary here stands for trust. What is the trust here? SBI happens to be a third party. So SBI has all those people's name who have been contributing to this electoral bond scheme. So SBI has to maintain a trust between SBI as well as the person who is giving that particular amount to SBI. So that is the fiduciary relationship. So ideally, State Bank of India should not give this particular information, because if it happens to give this information out in the public forum, it is violating the trust posed by these people who have contributed the money to the State Bank of India. If this information is given, it ultimately means that the fiduciary relationship is violated. So what has the Information Commission said here? That if the SBI information is given in the public forum, it means there is a violation of the fiduciary relationship. Since there is no public interest involved in the present scenario, we, the Central Information, cannot access a third party or give out this particular information, as this would be violating the fiduciary relationship, says the Information Commission. Also remember, we have to look by into another important section as well. Now that we have understood about section 8 of 1 of E of J, there is another section called as 8 of 2 of the RTI Act. It currently goes on to say that if there is a larger public interest involved, if there has to be a protection of the larger public, in such a scenario, private interest, protected interest does not matter, says the right to information. So what the Information Commission has done is it has read a narrow reading of section 8 of 1 of V, but when you look into the subsequent one, that is 8 of 2, public interest matters over the protected interest. So what is the protected interest? When it comes to the political parties, we have the funding. Yes, political parties will have to be provided the fund, but what if this particular money given by this person to the State Bank of India is a black money, or it can be from any other illegal means as well? So knowing that this is a right money or wrong money is the right of every citizen. So why is it wrong is the question of this particular article. So basically it has gone on to question the Central Information Commission, that it has read this particular section in a narrow path rather than opening up to section 8 of 2 is what we have to understand. So basically what will be the impact of this particular reading? The CIC order is a major setback to the transparency. Why? Because we have the Election Commission of India in the past which has gone on to criticize the electoral bond scheme, and we also have the Reserve Bank of India which has also raised concerns about the electoral bond scheme as well. It has said that this electoral bond scheme has every potential to increase the black money circulation, money laundering, cross-border counterfeiting as well as forgery. So if the Reserve Bank of India is saying so, if the Election Commission of India is saying so, why is that the Central Information Commission giving a contradictory opinion, which means the transparency is violated, which means the political parties will not be accountable to the citizens? As a result, the whole idea of right to information, which is an ingrained aspect under the fundamental rights established under Article 19, is violated, says this article. So the only option right now that we have is we head to the Supreme Court of India. We also have number of petitions that are already filed in the Supreme Court of India, and the Supreme Court of India will have to expedite this particular process. So going forward, free and fair democratic process, which is an important aspect of the basic structure doctrine, also means that indirectly we have to know whether this is free and fair elections, because the money that is being pumped might also be illegal money. So getting this information from the Information Commission is right and way forward, says the author in this particular scenario. So giving all this information will ultimately serve the transparency and will keep the political parties accountable to the people of India, is what we have to understand in reference to this article. But to understand what is this electoral bond scheme, kindly look into the link that we would be providing in our description box. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the climate policy needs new ideas. It speaks about how we have to bring changes when it comes to our approach towards climate change. When we go back to the year 1950, the contribution of United States of America to the total emissions peaked at about 40%. Out of 100%, 40% of the carbon emissions was made by United States of America. Then when we look into the other European countries, we have the Northern America or the European countries, and their population is less than one third when it comes to the global population. But the emissions that they have made is too huge, says this article. Apart from this, when you look into the reconstruction plan after the Second World War, they have accelerated the material use. Since they had to revamp, transform their economy, what we had is the urbanized sector. So because of the increasing urbanized sector, what we have is increased energy use, what we have is increased transport use, and what we have is emissions, that which was reflecting in all these important economies. As a result, it is these industrialized, advanced countries which have contributed more to the global climate change is the first part of this article. When you look into the urban sector, the author goes on to say that about two-thirds of the emissions arise from the demand of the middle class for infrastructure, mobility, buildings and diet, and all the investments that are made during a particular period, its negative repercussions will happen 30 to 40 years down the lane. So what was once the industrially revolutionized countries which developed in 1800s and 900s, its repercussions is being felt right now because of the increasing temperature as well as the warmer temperature. So the industrialization and urbanization are not a problems per se, but how the transformation happens over a period of time is where the major problem is. What we have in the current economics is about keeping the commodity prices low, overusing the resources, defining process as a material abundance, and assuming that technology would also solve the ecological problem. So advancement, industrialization and urbanization is not a problem, but greed of the man is where the major problem is. The author here has gone on to speak about carbon neutrality as well. What is this carbon neutrality? As much as we have carbon emissions for a particular period, the same amount of carbon reduction has to take place in a particular year as well. Are we focusing on carbon neutrality? As a word, we are giving extreme focus to the concept of carbon neutrality, but when it comes to the reality, it is far less, it is far outdated, says the author in the present scenario. So when you come and look into the statistics, the richest 1% of the global population emit more than 2 times the emissions of the bottom 50%. So where is the parity? Where is the equity? Says the author. In order to overcome all these issues, the historical mandate and the increasing urbanization and the riches controlling all this, what we require is a deeper introspection. So India has to take a stand, the global community has to take a stand, and what they have to look at is social goals over the environmental goals. There are people and there are countries who have already developed. They need to make sure that others are also developing, other countries are also developing. So what needs to be focused is on the social goals and not on the material benefits of the economic activity, says this article. So when we are looking at the sustainability benchmark, whether it is the housing sector or the transport sector or eliminating the food waste, it is us India who is contributing to the world globally. But you have countries like the developed countries or United States of America, their meat consumption is more, their transport emissions are more. So what they have to focus is on the reduction, improvise on the technology, ultimately coming up with new innovative ideas to reduce what is called as the carbon emissions is the need of the hour, says this article. So kindly remember, this article majorly speaks about the historical context, the historical injustice, that which has been perpetuated by the developed countries, and how they also have to make sure that developing countries are also boosting their economy in the near future by providing the technology, the resources and funding is what this article all about. We have discussed this in the past when it comes to the Paris Agreement and the recent climate summit as well. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about resilient supply chain. What is this resilient supply chain? What is this article all about has been explained in one of our videos, and the link for the same will also be provided in our description box, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Which was the first state in India to adopt the fly ash utilization policy? The answer to this is Maharashtra. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following is or advantage of fly ash? It can be utilized in cement plants. Fly ash can be used as soil ameliorant for wasteland reclamation. It enhances water retention capacity. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken both these practice questions? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, all the three are the advantages of fly ash. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Digital Ocean platform, which of the following statements is or correct? It is a web-based application to share information on marine data developed by INCOS, an autonomous body under the Ministry of Science and Technology. The platform will serve as a one-stop solution for all the data related needs for a wide range of users, including research institutions, operational agencies, as well as strategic users. The answer to this is 2 only. Why? Because this does not come under the Ministry of Science and Technology, but instead it comes under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, or else this particular statement is right. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So basically, all the information that is required with respect to the ocean, it will be fed on a single platform. So with this single platform on, which happens to be a digital tool, there are number of people who will be able to take the information. Let's say for example about the oceanic differences, or the maritime industry, or the policy makers, or the academic community. All that they have to do is log into this particular digital ocean, and every information about the ocean atmosphere will be provided as part of the digital ocean campaign. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about Gavi Alliance. It is a global partnership dedicated to food for all. Its partners include UNICEF, the World Bank, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation only. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is none. Why? Because this is a global partnership, not as food for all, but it provides vaccine, so it is vaccination or immunization for all. Basically, this is one of the mission to save children's lives and protect the people's health by increasing access to the immunization in all the poor countries. It is not only these three organizations that are present, there are other advocacy groups as well. There are sovereign governments which are also involved. There are other faith-based organizations and academia and vaccine manufacturers who are also part of this particular alliance. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to National Human Rights Commission, which of the following statements is or incorrect? The chairman and the members hold office until they attain the age of 65 years. The NHRC cannot inquire in a case where the complaint is made after 1 year of the incident. Which of the statements are incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement. So the answer to this is one only. Why? Because it is not 65 years. Instead, it is 70 years. And the second statement is correct. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. In Indian history, the Rakma Bai case of 1884 revolved around women's rights to gain education, age of consent, restitution of conjugal rights. The correct answer to this is 2 and 3. Why? Because this is not about gaining education, but it is about the other two. So the answer to this is 2 and 3. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Explain the role of indigenous communities in protecting our forest. Next question. Suppressing knowledge of political financing will break the basic bonds of democracy. Elaborate the statement in reference to electoral bonds. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with some constructive criticism. In case you have liked our initiative, please do like and comment on our YouTube channel. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.